Hello, everyone. My name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about Recitatif, written by Toni Morrison. Now, before I go into summary analysis of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and/or comment so that the channel can continue to grow. Now, this short story by Toni Morrison is very interesting. Within the short story, we meet two girls. One is named Twyla, and the other is named Roberta. And Toni Morrison doesn't tell us whether There's one of them is black, one of them is white. We don't know which is who, and she never tells us. I mean, you can try to figure it out by reading the short story, but it's really not clear. It's very ambivalent. Who is who? Who is white? Who is black? I mean, you can try to read this short story by thinking, maybe the first time you read it, maybe tell yourself Twyla's black, and then read it again and tell yourself that Roberta is black. It's really not going to help you, because this is the point of the story: is to read the story without knowing which color these girls are. And pretty much it challenges you. It challenges you to think about, well, what kind of preconceived notions you have about black and white people, and what does that say about the story? So it's very interesting. It's really, for me, it's the first story that I've read that really withholds information, and the fact that Toni Morrison withholds this information adds a whole new layer in this short story, and it also it makes you kind of like want to know which one of them is black, which one of them is white. But don't focus on that too much, because there's a lot that's going on within this short story. So basically, what happens within the short story is that these two girls, they're in a children's shelter. Twyla's mother is a dancer. That's what we're told, and because her mother is a dancer, her mother can't take care of her. Roberta's mother is sick, and so Roberta's mother can't take care of her. So they find themselves in this children orphanage, or this children's shelter, where they're being looked after. While their mothers try to get their stuff together. Try to get their lives together. But they truly never do, and these girls are pretty much left to raise themselves on their own at a very young age. 8 years old. That's very young. So they meet at the shelter, and life at the shelter is not too bad. I mean, it's tough. You're a young kid, and your parents are already out of your life. Your mothers are not what you would want. Twyla's mother is Roberta's mother. These kids are leading tough lives as young children. We have these older girls, the Gar girls. They're a little bit older girls, more experienced, that the Twyla and Roberta see in this shelter. And these girls, they you can see that they've had a tough background, a tough life. And all of the other kids, within the shelter, there's kids of all kind: white, black, Hispanic, of all races, even Korean. We're told within the short story. So all these kids are kids that have been they're orphans. It's an orphanage, basically, because all of these kids, their parents are dead. We're specifically told that their parents are dead, and their parents are somewhere in heaven. So the story begins in a very sad place. A bunch of kids, kind of like going through the world on their own, and Roberta and Twilight, they kind of find each other, and there's a lot of differences between them, because one's black, one's white. We don't know who. But they do share a bond of, they both have. They're the only two kids in the orphanage, or in this child shelter, that their parents are not dead. Their parents are alive. It's just that their parents are going through things where their parents can't take care of them. So that's what's going on here. Now, Twyla and Roberta, there's one day where their mothers do come visit them. Their mothers visit them, but it's really not what they would want. It doesn't really end the way that they would want. Roberta's mother, though, is a little bit more capable. I would say she's kind of a better mother than Twyla's mother. Twyla's mother, we're told that she's a dancer. Specifically, I don't know what this means. Like, she's a dancer. Does she have some type of mental problem? Is she some type of actual dancer? Does she have some? So Twyla's mother, it kind of feels like as if her problem is psychological or mental, while Roberta's mother, her problem is more physical, something that's in some type of illness that's relating towards her body, her physical body, and Twyla's mother seems to have a problem that's related to her mind. That's an interesting thing to think about when we think about this short story. So life goes on. Eventually, Roberta does leave the shelter, and she goes to live with her mom. She does come back to the shelter, while she's a teenager, and eventually she does leave the shelter for good. When she's like, at the age of 14, she does leave it for good because, she has these seasons where her mother is good and bad, and, she goes back and forth to the shelter, and eventually, when she's old enough and she's a teenager, she just abandons the shelter. She abandons. It pretty much seems like she abandons the shelter. She just goes off on her own and lives her life. So that's Roberta. In the same way, Twyla grows up. She gets a job as a waitress. And she marries a fireman, and she has a son. And life goes on for her. And also Roberta, life goes on for her too. Later, they do meet in the restaurant, the diner that Twyla works at when she's older, and that's another thing with this short story. Time jumps from here and there. First we see the kids. They're 8 years old. They're young. Then it jumps to them as teenagers and getting their first swing at life and working and getting money and trying to figure out your place in the world. And then it goes all off into their adulthoods, into their motherhood, into them getting married and so forth. So that's what takes place within this work. So after the orphanage, after they grow up a little bit, Twilight gets a job at a diner. She's working there. She sees Roberta, and Roberta at this point she's with these two guys, and they have an appointment with Jimi Hendrix, but Twilight doesn't know who Jimi Hendrix is or was. And pretty much Roberta's friends pretty much they don't want to be associated with anybody who doesn't know Jimi Hendrix, and so they pretty much diss her off. And Roberta seems disinterested with Twyla, and it's a very cold reunion after they hadn't seen each other since the orphanages, since the shelter. So basically they go by 12 years go by after the diner, and then they meet each other again. And this time where they meet, they do like they're a little bit more warm towards each other. They have a conversation with each other, and Roberta tells Twyla, they get into this conversation about this girl by the name of Maggie. And Maggie was a worker at the shelter that was beat down. Her clothes were torn by the guard sisters, or the guard girls, not the guard sisters, the guard girls. And basically, Roberta tells Twyla, or they kind of get it mixed up throughout the short story. At some point, they believe that Maggie, this worker, was black, and then at other points they thought she wasn't, or she was white, or she was black, or she was white, and they accuse each other of racism, of being a bigot. And they go back and forth with this. Twyla doesn't believe that she would ever do something like that, to kick someone because of their color. And so they get into an argument, and they go their separate ways, because they can't remember exactly what happened to Maggie. Now Maggie, they say that she has legs of parentheses. They believe that she's mute, that she can't talk. So she's like, of this group of girls. Think about the shelter of forgotten children. Roberta, and Twyla, they've had hard lives. For forgotten girls, girls that they don't have family members, nobody to support them through life or back them up through life. And then they see this other girl by the name of Maggie, who's a worker at the shelter, and she's even more worse off because she's even worse. She's also like she has some differences or even some disabilities, and so they even look down upon Maggie even more condescending. They see her and condescendingly they look down upon her, and so they don't know exactly what happened to Maggie. They don't know exactly how to process it. So sometimes they blame each other for all of the horrible things they did to her because they called her names, they bullied her, they thought that she was deaf. But it's kind of like we don't really know because these girls, um, their memory is not really that great about what happened to Maggie or what happened in the shelter. They remember some things, but they don't remember the full picture. So, uh, after the diner, they did meet, and this meeting, the second meeting was in a supermarket, an upper class supermarket. And by this point, Twyla's married to a fireman, with her son, and Roberta is married to a wealthy guy that works in technology or something that she doesn't even understand. But apparently this guy has four children, and so Roberta's a stepmother to these four kids. They have another confrontation when it becomes because again one's black, one's white, and when desegregation was happening, kids of color were being brought into white schools, and they were mixing. The government, the United States, was mixing black and white students together. Roberta was protesting, and Twyla started protesting because of Roberta, and they were protesting because of their kids, but it got personal. It got personal. Twyla started, bringing signs to this picket line, and because throughout the short story, they have these moments where they ask each other about, how's your mom doing, and Twyla would say, my mom's a dancer, and Roberta would reply, my mom's, still sick. Twyla is saying my mom's still dancing. Roberta would say my mom is still sick, and they would talk about these deep things that they're going through, and then when it came to the point of this picket line, Twyla, she wrote signs that directly point at Roberta. And some of them were personal, and ultimately the signs got to Roberta. Roberta quit the picketing, and Twyla quit the picketing, and they accused each other of racism, of bigotry, and this friendship was just a rocky, rocky friendship. Um, and again, Twyla was trying to process the idea that she might have beat down a old black woman, but she doesn't remember it. Roberta says that's what happened, but she doesn't remember it. And so this conflict goes on. Later, they do meet again, and they clarify everything to each other. At this point, the ladies, they're older. They're much older. They have their families. This is a point where Twyla's son is in college, and Roberta's children have moved on, and they're older women at this point. They've made their way in the world. Roberta's richer than Twyla or has more money because Roberta married richer men, and Twyla has a good life. She has a husband who's a fireman. She has a son who's in college. So she did well for herself. Twyla did well for herself. Roberta did well for herself. And they at the end of the short story they kind of come together and they're like they reveal the truth to each other. They're like, okay, we didn't kick Maggie, we didn't do anything bad to her. I mean, yes, we did do something bad to her. We thought about kicking her. We thought about beating her, like the Gar girls did. But they come to the conclusion maybe we no we didn't, and but they don't remember what happened to Maggie or exactly what happened to Maggie. Um, and their memories are kind of like jumbled. Their memories are kind of all over the place. And so they kind of forgive each other. It seems like they could be friends in the future, but really nothing is clear here because throughout the entire short story, at some points they're very close, at some points they're very distant. At some points, they're just going through things, and they just because this is a friendship that's trying to exist in the time of civil rights, at the time of black and white people. Some got along, some didn't. Lots of racism, and this white girl and this black girl, they try to be friends. They do have a close bond because of what happened with their mothers, and how they were raised, and their past as children. But in terms of experiences as adults, they have very different and very distant experiences. They don't share the same experiences, and really the short story just pretty much ends with what happened to Maggie. What happened to Maggie? And it's kind of like we don't really know what happened to Maggie. Did we kick her? Did the Gar sisters kick her? Did something happen to Maggie? Like at the end, you're kind of left in a place where something happened to Maggie. It's something bad. We can assume by their reactions and the way that they're behaving that it's something bad, but they can't remember, and we don't know, and the script story doesn't reveal it to us. So that's pretty much what happens in terms of narrative, in terms of understanding the context and the setting, and what happened within the short story. In terms of a deeper meaning here, there's a lot to unpack. First of all, racism, um, these girls and their color, how that plays within the story, how one's white, one's black, um, you know, they're trying to exist within a world. They're trying to be friends within a world that tensions are very high, and even when their children are being shipped to different schools, they're still friends. They still know each other quite well, but this is something that affects their family, and also they do connect with they both had tough mothers to deal with, but other than that, they have lots of differences. Roberta and Twyla, they do compare each other to one another. They're trying to see, kind of like size each other up at different points of the short story. They call each other different names, bigot, racist. It goes, and the thing is, like, you as the reader, you're because you don't know who's white or who's black, and so you can't really attach anything to anybody. So you can't attach anything to Twilight, and you can't attach anything to Roberta. You can't say, because if you say that Twilight is black, well, then you would have to say Roberta's black, white. But so so this just leaves you in a place where, and the other thing is, they're not exactly sure of what happened to Maggie, and so you're not exactly sure of what happened to Maggie. Um, so yeah, these girls had a lot of similarities in their lives, but also a lot of differences. And this friendship, this relationship, I can't really even call it a friendship because they only see each other, like, literally years will go by, and then they'll see each other randomly. Their relationship, it's not even a friendship because their relationship is like, yes, we have this tie because of what happened when we were children. We were friends when we were children, but as adults, their experiences are very far and wide. I mean, the first time they meet is at the diner after the shelter, after the orphanage. It's in the diner, and the only reason why they meet in the diner is because Twyla works in the diner. And the next time it's in the supermarket, and the next time, it's not that they planned. Most of these meetings are not because that they planned to meet up. Even at the picket fence, the picket line, it's not that they were planned friends that were meeting up for a cup of coffee. All of this happened by accident. And so, in terms of deeper meaning, in terms of analysis here, you get a jumble of emotions between these two girls over racism, over them blaming each other, over them, this conflict between one another, over what happened to Maggie. They don't know if they were involved in the beatdown of Maggie. And the other thing is they do feel some shame because they shunned Maggie. They ridiculed her. They called her names. And so maybe they didn't beat her or knock her down and beat her, but they were involved in the abuse. And they don't even truly remember her color. So, you get this race aspect playing here. You get this guilt aspect playing here. You get the fact that they're friends but not. You get the fact that they keep running into each other, and it seems like they're destined to run into each other, even when they don't want to run into each other. So they're friends but not. They're similar but not. So the meaning of this short story is really, it's like things keep swapping and things keep changing and nothing's really firmly placed upon the ground. We're not even solid, we're not even sure on the race of these girls. So you can't say either or which one is black, which one is white. So you know that racism is present, but you can't attach it to anybody. uh, you can attach the trauma of having tough childhoods, and really that's what really connects these two girls. They both had tough childhoods, and it's kind of like they're trying to hold on to that as tightly as they can to somewhat have a relationship. But other than that trauma of having a mother that dances and a mother that's sick and being stuck at a shelter, their lives take very different paths. I think Roberta, I think she married all the men she married, or she married for money. She wanted to have a secure life for money. Twyla, on the other hand, I think that she's more down to earth. Got a stable job, married a stable man, you know um think about it, working at a diner, very stable, staying in one place. She married a fireman, very stable, working in one city. Becoming a mother. That Twyla's very stable, very down to earth. And this might have a lot to do with her mother, because her mother was a dancer. Maybe her mother was always moving, never stable, never still. And so Twyla became the opposite of her mother, staying still, diner, fireman, son, establishing roots. Roberta, on the other hand, she had a sick mother, and Roberta's more kind of like, go with the wind. She's basically, marrying for stability, marrying rich men, staying with rich men, for stability. Going off of those two boys over Jimi Hendrix, going on wild adventures, and so these girls are similar because of the trauma they faced as children, but as adults, they take life in very different direction. Twyla wants to be more stable, while Roberta is more adventurous and more pleasure seeking, and ultimately more wealthy because, well, I guess she saw what not having enough can be like, and she wanted nothing to do with that. Twyla, on the other hand, is more, middle class, mother, father, children, stable income, diner, fireman, stable jobs. Um, so very different paths of life, and the only thing that ties them together again is you know the trauma that they faced as kids. Um, so yeah, it's a very, well, it's a very, this it doesn't leave you in a place. This short story doesn't leave you in a place where you get answers or conclusions to all the things that were raised. It actually makes you think about your preconceived notions and your ideas about race and your ideas about life and, well, what trajectory it's going in. So these two girls, they have a friendship, they have a bond, but it's a bond that's based on, shared trauma, and their friendship going on forward. It doesn't seem like a good foundation to go off, because they just led very different lives, even though their lives began in the same at the same place. So this short story leaves you with a lot to consider. But that's all I had to say about it. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video.